Bottom Line.
Welcome to the Payments Podcast. I'm your host, Bottom Line Managing Editor, Owen McDonald. Financial fraud is a very serious crime. Payments industry is fighting it, but it's clear we need to do more. When the defenses of banks or corporations are breached, oftentimes a certified fraud examiner or CFE is called in to forensically resolve these incidents. That's where the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, or ACFE, comes in. The association has trained thousands of examiners over the years, and they've never been busier. Check fraud is up nearly 400%, and digital fraud is still rising despite all the countermeasures put in place in the last 4 years. To talk about this fraught financial landscape, I'm delighted to welcome John Gill, president of the ACFE. In addition to his considerable ACFE duties, John is also an attorney, co-author of the Fraud Examiner's Manual, former publisher of Fraud Magazine, and a sought-after subject matter expert. John Gill, president of the ACFE, welcome to the Payments Podcast.
Owen, thanks for having me.
We're really glad you could be here, John. This is a talk about fraud, and I'm going to kick us right off. Our listeners know that we talk about trends. There's no commercials on the Payments Podcast. But having said that, John, I would like you to give us a brief synopsis of what a certified fraud examiner does and how the ACFE works with banks, financial institutions, and law enforcement to catch thieves.
So, Owen, we are the only organization that is dedicated 24/7, 365 days a week to fraud, and in all types and kinds. A lot of our members work for financial institutions because, as you can imagine, just like the bank robber said, that's where the money is. So we have members in 120 countries around the world. And as you know, fraud is a global problem. But the fun thing about working at the ACFE and with 93,000 members is we have one dedication, and that is to finding fraud and trying to get rid of it, and then trying to do what we can to prevent it. And so I'm proud to speak to groups all over the world. And like just this fall, I've been to Peru, Colombia, Chile, Dubai, and which is good that I like to travel because I'm on the road a lot. But we call it spreading the gospel of, hey, fraud is bad, but it is preventable. There are things that you can do about it. And so one of the things, and we're this is going to be broadcast during International Fraud Awareness Week. So this is something that ACFE started many years ago to have some sort of a program with their organization, with their employees, with their vendors, with management, to dedicate themselves to thinking, all right, what is our fraud risk and what can we do about it? And we do a lot of research. We do the Report to the Nations every 2 years. And we send a survey out to all of our members and ask them what they're seeing, what they're hearing. One of the main things that we are seeing, and this is a good trend, is an upward tick in fraud awareness training. Because people commit fraud, but people can also catch fraud. So you need your employees, you need your vendors, you need your customers as your eyes and ears within the organization. So when we ask our members every 2 years, how did you find out about this fraud? The single largest category is tips. 43% of cases. And that's twice as much as internal audit or management review or external audits. It really is an important thing to have. And the research shows that if you have fraud awareness training, then when there is a fraud, it's caught faster with fraud awareness training, and the losses are half of what they are at companies without fraud awareness training. So there are things that you can do about it.
That's incredible. Those are some great stats. By the way, yes, we are recording this for International Fraud Awareness Week 2024. And those dates, John, I believe are November 17 through 23.
Correct.
Right. So in ACFE's 2024 Anti-Fraud Technology Benchmarking Report, you found that use of AI and machine learning will triple in the next 2 years. And that's, pretty much in line with other estimates. However, John, of course, the enemy is on the same timetable. So are we at the start of an AI duel between Organized Crime Inc. and the good actors, John? And who would win today, hypothetically, do you think?
Oh, I always got to put my money on the good guys. So I think ultimately we're going to come out ahead. But it's like any technology, especially organized crime, that's all they have to do. And so they're always going to have a slight advantage over the rest of us, is because if you are a criminal enterprise, what is your full-time job? And that is how to find ways to commit crime. Unfortunately, the rest of us have real jobs that we're trying to do, where we have to produce products, we have to provide services, we have employees, we have all this other, and we've got to carve out time to try and look for fraud. So yes, criminals are always going to be slightly ahead, but that's the way it's been for centuries. It's, look at bank robbers. Like, that's all they had to do was sit around and look and plan out how to do a bank robbery, but they rarely get away with it because prevention and detection is so key. So we have to do the best we can to stay one step ahead. And with artificial intelligence, everybody's been talking about that. I think it is a game changer, but what I've been reading, listening, going to every conference I can on it. The biggest caution I have is it's not a magic bullet. You have to implement it correctly. And that's where I'm seeing some of the disconnect between people in the field and management. So I think sometimes management thinks, we can just hire this company, we can install this program, and it's going to find fraud. Unfortunately, it's not quite that easy. But if you do it correctly, it can really it's going to be a big thing. But you have got to sit down. You've got to first do a fraud risk assessment or an enterprise risk assessment. Depends on, what areas you're looking at. But if we're looking just at fraud, you can do a fraud risk assessment and look like, where are vulnerabilities? And it could be in payment systems. It could be in fraud from customers. It could be check fraud, whatever it is. And think through what's the process and what are the red flags that we can find out early to help us with this. And it could be checking, the database of addresses or social security numbers or like transactions. And banks have been doing this, and they've gotten really good, with like credit card fraud. It's very rare that I get the fraud alerts, and when they do, they really are, right on the money. And artificial intelligence is similar. But if you teach it what's a good transaction, what's a bad transaction, and you do that in the right way, and you make sure that the data that you're feeding it is accurate and representative of what you're doing, it can review transactions so much faster than any other method we've seen so far. I mean, a human being can take a Excel spreadsheet, put payments in it, and you can sort it, you can look for duplicates, you can do all types of things with it, but that takes a long time. But if you set up an AI model to do those same things, it can do it, in a matter of seconds. And I think that's going to be the future, but we have to slow down, I believe, look at the risks and come up with a list of what are the red flags that we want the computer to find for us, and then go through a very lengthy process of teaching it using archival data and make sure the data is correct, representative of your population, and say these transactions are good, these transactions are bad, and here's why, and here are the things that you should be on the lookout for.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Great prescriptive advice from the ACFE on what you should be doing with AI, which leads me to my next question, John. We're entering the era of faster payments. Fraud is improving too. What do you make of fraud in the time of RTP, FedNow, and the real-time rails?
Well, it is scary that transactions are, quote, being verified in a matter of seconds, because as it's hard to do that. If you have a real transaction, large amounts of money, you have a human being looking at it, it's not something that you can do in a matter of seconds. It takes a while, but nobody wants to do that because then that slows the system down. But the good news is there are tools that I think are being worked on. And when we started doing mobile check deposits, I was really concerned about that. When you could take a picture of your check and you could deposit in your account, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the end of banking as we know it, because there's just going to be so much fraud. I was really freaked out about it. But I did some research, and I found out the risk is not as great as we thought. And I think one of the reasons was banks were very good at establishing some limits. For example, you could only do so many checks a day, and there was a limit on what you could do. And so it didn't really make it attractive for organized crime or for large fraud rings, because there was a limit put on how much you could, get away with. And I think banks were willing to accept slight risk in order to provide good, customer service, get the checks in quickly. I think the same thing with these real-time processing of checks and electronic payments is they need to work together with their customers to figure out ways to, if there's going to be a compromise, can we limit the extent of it? For example, if you talk to the customers and find if you're going to do a lot of real-time processing with transactions, then maybe you want a separate account and you only keep a limited amount of funds in there that you have designated you're going to send out within this period of time. That way, if there is a breach or something happens, your entire bank account is not at risk. Or just like what they did with mobile deposits, you could put some kind of limit on no payment over this amount without some kind of second factor authentication, like a text or an email or something like that. And I think that's the key. You can have fast transactions. Everybody wants that. I think that's a good thing, but it's up to the banks and their customers to come up with some check mechanisms to make sure that they're not caught off guard. Because I think a lot of people don't realize, even right now, with your ATM card, if that's compromised and they have access to your bank account, they could drain everything you have in there before you know it. But if you have a separate account where you keep the majority of your funds and you only have that in there what you use to pay bills, then at least if there is some kind of a problem, they can't take everything you own.
That's great advice. And as we get ready to wrap, John, this is the Payments Podcast, and our obsession is B2B, business payments. John, can you wrap us up by giving me a rundown of B2B financial crime next year, 2025, as you see it? What are we expecting by way of business payment crime at the ACFE? What are you looking out for?
The thing that scares me the most, I will say, goes back again to artificial intelligence and impersonation. And I've seen some demonstrations that are very scary, because they can, the days of getting an email that half the words were misspelled, has a fuzzy logo on it, and I've talked to employees and people, and they're like, oh, well, I'm not worried about phishing scams because I can spot those a mile away. Well, 10 years ago it was easy, but it's not anymore. They're very sophisticated, and the ability to mimic someone's voice is incredible. And there are numerous sites, but one that I did one with George Clooney, was saying that, John, I saw your picture online. I think you could be my body double of movies. You look so much alike. And I played that for my wife, and she didn't believe it for an instant, but it did sound exactly like him. And now they have they can impersonate your face. That's what keeps me up at night. It really does. And there's a lot of things online where they'll show you pictures and you say, is this an artificially generated person or is this a real picture? And it's almost impossible to tell. So I think organizations are going to have to work within their processes to make sure that there's some sort of other check mechanism to verify before they do anything. I was talking with some experts at a conference, and I thought he had a really good idea. And he does this with his own family, that there's some sort of code word, phrase, password that in order to send money, to do anything, that they have to know this code word or password. And I think it's going to have to be 2, 3, 4 factor identification. If the CEO supposedly calls in and wants to transfer money somewhere, then they're going to have to know the code word, or they're going to have to know some kind of phrase. Eagle flies at midnight, something like that. So that goes back to, the Cold War. And that's what we're going to have to do, because if you can impersonate anybody you want, so we're going to have to come up with those kinds of mechanisms. And I think banks are going to have to do the same thing. And most of them have the technology. We do that already. You log into your bank account from a device it doesn't recognize, then it's going to send you a text message, or it's going to ask you for some kind of a code. I think that's the future, but it really does have to come down to, you can't trust what you see. You can't trust what you hear. I think employees, customers, we all are going to have to be thinking about, how do we verify who we're dealing with? And it's going to, again, have to be done quickly. But I think AI is a problem, but it also, I think, can work in our organizations to spot things faster, like duplicate payments, duplicate invoices, keep track of, are we ordering computers before we normally do? Do we have like this surplus? Because it could be, a shell company scheme, or they're buying them and selling them. So there are all sorts of things that we can use AI to help us monitor things in real time. But fraud can happen in real time as well. And so I think it's being vigilant and doing periodic fraud risk assessments. And it doesn't have to be complicated. There's a publication we did with COSO last year, and it just walks through some simple steps about looking at your organization, thinking through your processes, and thinking, well, where am I vulnerable? Where am I the most vulnerable? And just thinking about, well, if we were going to try and stop this or come up with some red flags, where would we start? It's not as overwhelming as it sounds, but you just have to start somewhere.
Agreed. Well, remember, folks, every November we have International Fraud Awareness Week. It's a good time to plan a thorough security audit. The ACFE can help with that. Our thanks to a great guest, John Gill, president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. To our amazing audience, thanks for listening. Hit subscribe and catch us again on your favorite podcast platforms, including Apple, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Bye for now.
Podcast from Bottom Line.